Welcome to Yahoo Finance Presents Hispanic Stars. Today we're with California Secretary of State Alex Padilla. Secretary Padilla, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me, and thank you for celebrating this month.
Let's talk first about what's happening with the elections. How is California ensuring that as many voters vote on election night?
Right. No, appreciate the question because we know this is a big election and a big election year. Every election we work hard to make sure that our elections are as accessible as possible to all eligible voters, and of course is as secure as possible given a lot of the threats to the integrity of our elections that we've been learning about for years. But in this coronavirus pandemic, we also have to work hard to make sure that our elections are as safe as possible from a health perspective. So realizing all that, California has decided to build on a lot of the policies that we've been championing for years, including registering to vote online and automatic registration through the DMV. A lot of the excitement has led to record registration, not just for our March primary, but also going into November. And the options for actually voting as well, vote by mail has been very popular in California, growing in popularity for the last 20 years. And so we're deciding to send every active registered voter a ballot by mail in advance of the November election because we know it's convenient, we know it's secure, but it'll be the safest option to vote this November, while we also work with counties to ensure as many safe in-person opportunities to vote are available for voters who need that.
And explain to us a little bit about these mail-in ballots. How do they work, and should voters be concerned about mail-in ballots and drop boxes?
So, well, we know there's a lot of questions and basically false accusations about the integrity of vote by mail circulating these days. But vote by mail in California, and frankly for many states across the country, is nothing new. Voters have had the option for many years to receive their ballot by mail, fill it out at their convenience, and then return it however they prefer, either by mail or delivering it in person. So we're simply growing that, expanding that to all voters in California. In our primary, more than 70% of the ballots cast were by mail. So again, it's nothing new. Folks who have questions about the security of vote by mail should know that there's many safeguards in place to protect the integrity of the election.
Is there a possibility that we won't know the results on election night?
Well, California has developed a reputation over the years that it takes us so long to finish counting ballots. And that's frankly true, in part because of the size of the electorate. California has nearly 21 million registered voters as we speak. That's more than the population of most other states. So the sheer volume takes longer to count in California. What we've gotten used to here is on election nights, we'll have a pretty good sense of the outcome of most contests, but for close contests and for final results, it can take not just a few days, it can take a couple of weeks to finish processing ballots, right? We want to make sure that every eligible voter has a chance to have their voice heard in the election. And so if it takes a little bit longer, we'd rather get it right than get it fast. I think what's unique about the 2020 election is you have a lot of other states that are ramping up vote by mail significantly, maybe for the first time. States like Michigan, states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and others that are ramping up vote by mail for the first presidential election in their experience. And so if the race is too close to call in several pivotal states, yes, there is a possible scenario that we won't know on election night. Maybe we won't know the day after or for a few days. And so if that happens, what we need to ask the public is to be patient. There's no funny business going on. It is the process at work, the appropriate signature verification, auditing of ballots, etc. But the vote count will be complete in plenty of time for the Electoral College, for the seating members of Congress, etc. So don't believe maybe all the conspiracy theories that are certainly going to be circulating on social media.
If the Democratic candidates win the presidency, Senator Kamala Harris's seat will become vacant. And I know that there's a campaign going on right now from Latino Victory, a Democratic super PAC that is that launched that says pick Padilla, basically, for Governor Newsom to pick you to take that vacant seat as senator. If that were to be the case, what would be one of your first order of businesses?
Look, well, I'm certainly honored that my name is part of that discussion. Not going to lie about that, but if our conversation up until now has made it clear, I am absolutely focused on this November's election. Stakes are high, not just for California, but for the nation, and we need to make sure that the election is as accessible as possible for all eligible voters, as secure as possible against all the threats to it that we're seeing, and is as safe as possible for voters and election workers during this COVID-19 pandemic.
And how do you expect the Latino vote to turn out this year? Jennifer Lopez is part of the campaign Vote Like a Madre. How significant is the Latino vote in these elections?
Look, I think the Latino vote is huge, not just in numbers in states like California and Texas, et cetera, but in a lot of the increasingly pivotal states from a presidential contest standpoint, right? The Electoral College dynamics, states like Arizona and Colorado, Florida, of course, even Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, on and on and on. As the Latino community continues to grow in population in states across the country, so is the Latino percentage of the electorate. So we know that there's many states where the Latino vote can and will make the difference. So it's important that our community spreads the word. Anybody who's 18 years or older and a citizen should absolutely make sure that they're registered to vote and knows the rules for where you live for how to vote this November. Voting is a little bit different state by state, the vote by mail rules and schedule, et cetera, the in-person voting rules, et cetera. So for all voters, we recommend, first of all, make a plan. Do you want to vote by mail where it's offered? Do you want to vote in person? Don't wait for the last minute. Do it the first day the polls open if you're going in person. Or if you can vote by mail, request your ballot now. And as soon as you receive it, fill it out. Don't wait. Send it back in as soon as possible.
Hispanics have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. How do we solve this as a sort of society? How do we help Hispanics during this time especially?
Yeah, look, the Hispanic community, the Latino community, I think has disproportionately been in the spotlight, and not necessarily for good reasons, over the last 4 years. And the COVID pandemic has just exacerbated a lot of the disparities that we were well aware of before, not just from a health impact, access to healthcare impact, but also from an economic impact, right? We're disproportionately the essential workers that are out there, risking exposure. We're also disproportionately feeling unemployment and loss of wages, and soon, homelessness, et cetera, because of eviction policies and things like that. So there's a lot of policy issues that are intertwined with COVID-19, and we're not going to see the relief ultimately when there's a proven and widely available vaccine. But in the meantime, we can help our cause by making sure we're all abiding by the public health directives that are coming from federal, state, and local officials.
You have an engineering background, yet you work in public service. How do you square the two? How did you end up in public service?
Well, to me, it actually makes a lot of sense, right? Engineers are trained to solve problems. I know I did a lot of math problems when I was in college, and I sort of bring that philosophy to public service. That's what we expect of our elected officials, to solve problems. And I only say that half jokingly. I really do think that mindset has been helpful to me as I've worked in the city council in Los Angeles, in the state legislature for a couple of terms, and obviously now as California Secretary of State. But I think my journey wasn't just bringing a methodical thought process to public service, but was inspired by political dynamics in California back in the early to mid 90s. When I was recently home from college in 1994, California was undergoing a significant economic recession at the time. So holding on to a job in aerospace was a lot more challenging than you could imagine. But at the same time, there was a measure on the California ballot in November of 1994 that we refer now to as Proposition 187. And it was a question for California voters that said basically this: should we make immigrants and children of immigrants no longer eligible for public services? Right? Examples include if your only chance of seeing a doctor, if your parents or your family didn't have health coverage through their employment, was visiting a county health clinic, that would no longer be an option because public health is a public service. there was a debate about whether kids would be able to go to schools because public education, according to some, is a public service. The measure even would have required teachers and any school personnel to report to the authorities anybody they suspected of being in the country undocumented. It sounds pretty cruel. It doesn't sound like the California we think of today, and it isn't, because in response to that, I got engaged in politics. So many people, like my parents, who had no sense of urgency of becoming citizens, finally naturalized not just to become citizens, but to register and to vote. A whole generation of people who might have been cynical about politics, like me at that age, realizing we have to get involved to change the political trajectory of our state. So sadly, we still hear some of that rhetoric in other parts of the country, including the White House. But California's come a long way, and I think it's been a story in California that should be a source of hope for other states just now undergoing some of that demographic change, coupled with the economic strife that we're seeing. We still hear a lot of that scapegoating rhetoric, but we can and we will overcome.
And did you have mentors along the way?
Well, a lot of mentors along the way, right? Nobody achieves success alone. I always start my mentor conversations talking about my parents, recognizing their struggle, their sacrifice, and their courage, coming to the United States from Mexico in pursuit of a better life, seeing my dad work hard for 40 years as a short order cook, for the same 40 years, my mother cleaning houses. So if you want to talk about values and work ethic, no better mentors for me than my parents. They raised 3 children. I have a sister who is in education, my brother who's in city government. So we're all public servants. That's not a coincidence. But another one I'd be remiss if I didn't point out is my friend Tony Cardenas. He was also a former engineer, had done a brief stint in real estate before running for office. And he asked me, I was at the ripe old age of 21, to manage his race for the state legislature. Complete underdogs. We were both learning as we went, but he won, served 3 terms in the state assembly, served on the city council, and now I'm proud to call him congressman. So I thank him for the opportunity to work for him and learn from him.
Secretary Padilla, thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you. Stay safe.